All right, everyone. It is the Week 11 Part 1 episode. Happy you decided to join me, and we're going to run through our typical list of 30 players. Let's start off with Brian Thomas Jr. So he was practicing all last week. He had that high ankle sprain. We thought he was going to suit up, but he ended up being declared inactive. We've talked before about how I was talking about benching him anyways if you have any other viable options, just because he hasn't performed, and with him likely playing through a little bit of an injury, I wouldn't really be trusting Brian Thomas. Bucky Irving returned back to practice last week, but importantly, we didn't see him practice in pads, which Bull said was the most important factor because it's not his foot that's the issue, it is his shoulder that's the issue. And I suspect he either has a partial thickness supraspinatus tear, as we've talked about extensively in my shorts, or a labral injury. Both of those we do need to see him take hits on. He is trending towards returning, so at this point, he's definitely a hold. Definitely a hold or a trade away if you're getting a starting caliber player in return. I know the trade deadlines have passed in a couple of leagues, but they're still there in some other ones. So Bucky Irving, some good news, but we can't really say whether or not he's going to get surgery until he sees how it feels after taking hits on that shoulder. Chris Godwin, another player injured all season. He isn't really doing too much when he was back, unlike some other players. So I wouldn't really be counting on him even when he returns. Like if he returns week 14, you saw him return back in the middle of the season and he didn't do that much and you want to trust him in your starting lineup for the fantasy football playoffs, probably wouldn't do that. Brandon Aiyuk, they said this week again they're not going to open his practice window. It's becoming less and less likely that he returns this season. They might just be holding him in case they make a playoff push, but I don't think he's going to be relevant for the fantasy football season. Ricky Pearsall, really sorry that I recommended that you guys start him because, he put up 1 point, so unfortunate in that regard. I really thought he was going to be more of a participant, especially with how high that scoring got. I said before, he's the fourth option, but he does have the potential to go off. So probably more of a best ball choice at this point than someone that you can trust in your lineup in the fantasy football playoffs. Aside from that, Brock Purdy, I did recommend that you start him, and he went off. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, I think around 200, 250 yards, something like that. So for a quarterback that had missed most of the season for a foot injury, I think that he did really well, to be honest. Omarion Hampton also returned back to practice, kind of. He's been doing some light jogging and all of that. Talked about before how I'm worried about some atrophy, but it does seem like he should have enough time before week 13 to hopefully recover a lot of that muscle mass that's lost. So, he's a hold. I would, unless you're getting like a really good trade offer for him, and he should be someone that gives you decent points in the playoffs, but I am concerned that he's going to enter a timeshare with Vidal because Vidal's been doing pretty well. Jayden Reed, we talked before about how the collarbone is his limiting factor, and he should be back around week 13. That's around the time of absence with the collarbone. The Jones fracture repair, that one was a shorter timeline of absence, so I think he should be fully recovered from that. Similarly to how Bucky's fully recovered from his foot injury, but still dealing with that shoulder injury. Trey Benson, he still is a hold, and I do think that he returns back either this week or next week to practice. They open his practice window, and I do think he will give you RB2 production. Meniscectomies don't really show that big of a drop off when they're coming back. There's breaking news here. Oh yeah, Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to talk about him later, so don't worry about that. Aside from that, Garrett Wilson. So he re-aggravated that hyperextension injury, which is either a bone bruise or PCL sprain. I'm actually going to go into depth about Drake London on my shorts today about why there's an increased occurrence of PCL sprains. Aside from that, Rhamondre Stevenson. So he didn't play last week, and Treveyon Henderson went off again. I think Treveyon Henderson is definitely forced a timeshare, but I do think Rhamondre likely returns back this week or next week since he already practiced last week. Aside from that, J.K. Dobbins, man, that's unfortunate. Lisfranc requiring surgery, that's a career-altering injury, and J.K. Dobbins has had 3 of them now. He had an Achilles tendon rupture, he had an ACL tear, which isn't the worst, but yeah, Lisfranc requiring surgery and Achilles, those are really significant injuries. And although Dobbins was able to return back well from his Achilles, I don't know if he's going to be able to return back well from this one. So if he's a dynasty person for you, I'd probably be selling him. Jackson Dart, he had that 4th concussion evaluation, which was diagnosed as a concussion. I do think he's at risk for missing this upcoming week. Average is only 1 week absence, but with him having so many concussions, optics aren't the greatest. So I would think that he misses this upcoming week, but we have to see how he practices. If he returns to even a limited practice this week, he's likely going to play. Terry McLaurin. So this is the guy that I was talking about that missed most of the season with injury, but when he was active, he went off. He possibly won you that week, even the week that he got re-injured. So he's a hold for me. He's already back practicing on the sidelines. I do think he returns, and when he's back active, you need to put him in your lineup, in my opinion. Dalton Kincaid, he has a Thursday game, and he already was logged as he do not practice on Monday. Hamstring injuries, they linger for about 3 to 4 weeks, so I do think that he likely doesn't play this week. Aside from that, Pacheco. So I talked about how Pacheco was inactive and Kareem Hunt was a good start. He got 50 yards and a touchdown. I think that's a good flex play. Pacheco seems like he has a grade 2 MCL sprain, so I do think that he is probably out this week again, so that makes Hunt a sneaky flex play again. Davante Adams, I hope you started him like I told you to because he did really well. Told you that back spasm wasn't really going to cause him anything. Oblique strain, back spasm. It was more in the back we saw where he grabbed, so I do think it was a back spasm. Aside from that, let's see here. Drake London. So Drake London is on everyone's mind because he has that PCL sprain. He's already out this week. People are wondering what's going to go on. I mean, he's going to be playing injured for you without his quarterback. He's going to be playing with Kirk Cousins, who he has a significantly worse rate with. I think he's a trade if you can trade him, if your trade deadline hasn't passed, because he's hard to trust in fantasy football playoffs with that kind of optics going around him injury-wise. Aside from that, Joe Burrow, I said I think that he comes back around week 13, week 14. He's way ahead of schedule, like about 4 weeks ahead of schedule. So with turf tear repair, but I don't think the Bengals will be risking their franchise quarterback. So he likely is just progressing really well. When he is healthy, he's another person that I would insert into my starting lineup. Sam Laporta, we talked before. I do think that he probably has a stress reaction in that back because normally back injuries, they don't cost players any time or they cost players a lot of time. There's not really an in-between here. And Sam Laporta is already on IR. With a stress reaction, with that, I went over it in detail in my short. It's inflammation and edema in that bone, but there's not a discrete fracture. So they can rest you, shut you down for a couple of weeks, wait for that edema to resolve, and then repeat the imaging. And then if there's not any kind of pain, they can return him back. It does sound like they are expecting him back around week 15, week 16. So he would be a plug and play for tight ends. Rico Dowdle, hope you started him. Quad contusion wasn't really anything. He got 15 points. He should get better week after week, so I'm not really concerned about him at all. Kayshon Boutte, he said that he had a hamstring injury on Twitch, which was wild. He said it was a grade 1, and grade 1s are typically 2 to 3 week absences. He already missed 2 weeks, or he might miss 3 weeks, but I do project that he returns back this week based on the reported mild nature of it. Bhayshul Tuten had an ankle eversion, and he said he was good, but I do suspect that it had a high ankle mechanism. ETN still did well, so I said that you should spend a decent amount of your fab budget on Tuten because there's not really that many players to spend fab on at this point in time, and we're nearing the end of the season, so what are you holding it on for? If he's still out on the waivers, you definitely need to pick him up. Eddy Pinero had a hamstring injury, which we know takes about 3 to 4 weeks, but with kickers especially, because they rely so much on unilateral leg motion that even if it's the non-kicking leg, it'll really alter their kicking mechanics. So it's not like they can just play through the injury because it's like golfing. Even a slight miscue or misbalance in strength can alter that kick. So I do think he's out for about 3 to 5 weeks, to be honest. Nico Collins was limited with an ankle injury on Monday, and he's got a game Thursday Night Football, so we really closely have to monitor this practice. But the fact that he was limited and not a D-not play, I'm pretty encouraged by it. So I do think he plays, and he should be a start. Marvin Harrison Jr., I talked about how he would likely miss about 2 weeks, and people were like, oh my God, he's going to miss like so much longer than that. But we look at other players. Big Ben, I'm blanking. I'm blanking so hard on one of my favorite quarterbacks. He missed only 1 game for an appendectomy. And aside from that, Minka Fitzpatrick only missed 1 game as well. So not really out of the realm possibility for Marvin Harrison Jr. to Roethlisberger, that's what it was. Marvin Harrison Jr. to miss like 1 to 2 games and then return back. Lane Johnson had a Lisfranc injury. I think he's out about 4 to 6 weeks. Sounds like it's not surgical, so a little bit less severe. Jalen McMillan, likely not returning this season. I think he had an alar sprain, which is the ligament that supports the top part of the cervical vertebrae at the base of the skull. These are multi-month absences, but it shouldn't affect him long-term. I do think he returns back next season or at the tail end of this season if they're in the playoffs. Bryce Young aggravated this right high ankle. We saw him get cleated, but we saw him cleated in an eversion injury. So that's kind of concerning to me. I think that he's at risk for missing this upcoming week, despite him putting up a record game last week. Good for him. Aaron Rodgers, we were talking about that breaking news. They just said that he doesn't need surgery, which we talked about before. He's pushing to play this week, which is not out of the realm of possibility. You saw my short. I cited that study that showed that 3 to 5 weeks of casting is not really necessary. They just need 1 week of casting. So I don't know if he's going to play this week, but it's possible. But they could put him in that exos brace, but not more than 1 week absence for Aaron Rodgers. That's it. Thanks for tuning in.